Alright, this will be a short video. I have made a few changes to Edric. I've also made a few changes to Zur. Some of these are experimental. Some of them I think I feel pretty good about. So the Edric changes are the Thran Dynamo and Solemn Simulacrum came out. Thran Dynamo might want to come back in just because the card's so absurd. But for now, I took out Thran for and replaced it with Teferi. I think that Teferi is a card that generates just as much mana as Thran Dynamo most of the time. Sometimes it generates more. And in general, it's a better card. Once it resolves, it's a little harder to resolve, of course. But it's also an extra card for Force of Will, another blue card. It's another way to win a game without necessarily having to rely on Edric as well. So, of course, Teferi works quite well with Thran Dynamo, so that might have been a mistake to take one out for the other, but we'll see. And then Solemn switched over to Oracle of Moldiah. The reason is that while I do want more artifacts for the one workshop, I also want more elves for the Archdruid and the Priest of Titanium. And in addition, Oracle has some combo potential with Scrib Ranger, with the Singleton of the Simic Growth Chamber, and with the abusive power of Crucible of Worlds. It's also just in general has a little bit of combo potential with cards like Sylvan Library, Jace perhaps. Although truthfully, if you're playing cards like Jace and Sylvan, maybe even Crucible to some extent, you're probably winning the game, so might be a little bit redundant. But I felt like the problem with Solemn, it's not that Solemn's a problem, and it does work nicely on the pod chain. It does a lot of good things. It works great with shop, of course. The problem I had is I just never felt great about playing it. It's a very good card, and much like the Tradewind Rider who's out of here, good cards might not be good enough. I think the cards have to be great, and Oracle has a kind of hit or miss where it does nothing and then it does rules breaking plays. So for those rules breaking plays like 0 mana rampant growth, cast 2 of those in the same turn, stuff like that, I think I'll leave it in. At any rate, that's the changes that I had now. Um, I'm sorry, and Worn Power Stone became Palladium Mirror. They're basically the same card, except one's a creature and can attack and draw cards with Edric, and one of them can't. Worn Power Stone comes into play tap, and then the next turn you can use it for 2 mana. The Mirror comes into play tapped, and the next turn you can use it for 2 mana. But besides the fact that Mirror can attack and carry equipment as a colorless creature, it also has the ability to be something you can fetch with Court of Calling, which is kind of nice. It does have the drawback that the opponent plays a board sweeper now that Worn Power Stone and Thran Dynamo are out of the deck. That's 2 less recovery cards potentially to have in play, and with Solemn Simulacrum gone, you're not even going to be rewarded for them sweeping your board. But all that said, I think this is ultimately a creature-based deck, and it's better to play creatures therefore. So let's run through this game that I've got for you, and then after the game, I'll bring up the Zur deck so you can check out the changes to that, which I think are a little bit more solid than the changes to the Edric deck. The Edric deck's certainly experimental, but I mean, I like them. I like the changes. Oh, I think I already had this game up. All right, so let me go ahead and get it started. Anyway, I'm playing against Kiri Body Omega, and Mr. Kiri Body Omega is playing Damia Sage of Stone. So this could be a good game. Hopefully it will be. My opponent does mulligan, and I'm going first, so we're even on cards theoretically. I just have that slight turn advantage, and I take advantage of it with a first turn Finhorn Elf. My opponent decides to strip mine, and this is a little weird because strip mining when your opponent has more mana than you is often wrong, but it might have been correct for him to do that here because I played the Finhorn off the Mana Confluence, and if I had had any land other than a land that deals damage to me, certainly I would have played the Finhorn off of that other land. So my opponent may be operating under the assumption that he might have caught me with my pants down and either cut off my blue or I just don't have a land drop at all, in which case his play is brilliant. That said, I do have a land, and as you saw, I drew the Phantasmal Image, so I'm going to go ahead and continue to press, and now it's 3 mana to 0, which is huge. Probably no coming back. I expected him to scoop on the next turn, but No, he gets an Elvish Mystic and makes it 2 to 3, so he's starting to even it out. I drew that Palladium Mirror. So this, as a Worn Power Stone, really wouldn't have been any better than a mirror right here. So I had a couple of choices. I could have held my land, cast Crucible, replayed the Mana Confluence, and said done. I think that's the least valuable. I think I'll use Mana Crucible into Confluence when I don't have a land in hand and I want to spend 3 mana to get a land into play, basically. So another option is right here. I cast Edric and then attack with this Finhorn Elf, the Phantom Elf. That way, if he chooses to trade and not give me a card, I lose the least valuable of the two. And I get to kill one of his creatures. Um, this not too shabby. I'm going to get a card either way. But I felt like, because I want to continue to press my advantage, I felt like the best play here is actually the mirror. And then on the next turn, I can follow it up with a combination of Crucible into Confluence into Edric, or I could do something like Crucible into what do we 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 mana Crucible into Shackles. I don't know. At any rate, it gives me choices, and that I felt like was more valuable than anything I could do with the rest of what was going on in my hand. So I actually tapped incorrectly here. I should have tapped the better elf here, which is really weird. Usually you try to not. But I went ahead and offered him a trade here, which he declined. And then he plays Mana Crypt, Ancient Tomb. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 mana. 2, 4, 5, 6 mana. So I went from 3 to his 0, and 2 turns later I have 6, and he has 6. Pretty crazy format. One of the things I love about it. But at any rate, this allows my opponent to actually cast a... And I was wondering what was 6, and I was actually hoping, and you don't say this often, but I was actually hoping he was going to play Terrastodon, because if he played Terrastodon, popped both my islands and gave me 2 elephants, and killed one of his mana sources, I was going to be super happy, because I would have easily replayed... I would have then easily played Crucible, started recasting my islands, and things would have been pretty nice for me from there. However, what he plays instead is Acidic Slime, which I really didn't want to see. But had this Palladium Mirror been a Worn Power Stone, this would have been no difference in terms of its survivability. He takes out the mirror, takes out my Soul Ring, basically. So I drew another land and decide that what I'm going to go ahead and do is fetch a Tropical. And then because he and I are playing a back and forth battle for mana advantage, mana dominance, I assessed that the correct play here is to Shackles out and steal his elf, which sets me at +1 mana and him at -1. So now I'm 6 to his 5. So if he plays a land next turn, it'll be 6 to 6. So I'm maintaining parity at least. And so there you go, 2, 4, 6 on his side, 6 on my side. And I draw Teferi. So I drew one of the test cards here, which was no different from Worn Power Stone in this game. And then I drew Teferi, which is quite a bit different from what would have been a Thran Dynamo, and I think better. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and cast Teferi. And make sure that I don't untap my own Phantom guy, because if I do, I will have a small problem there of him falling over dead immediately. So I untap his Mystic and then my 3 lands and go ahead and cast Crucible. I haven't played a land yet, so I play the Verdant. And what I'm really hoping is that he falls for the trap I have set for him. And he does, which is so fantastic. So I had a couple ways I could have played this. The one way, which I'm about to play, the other option was just to throw a Snapcaster out and trade. I did not like that scenario. I was thinking about possibly not doing the play I'm about to make, because if my opponent kills Crucible, and I won't get to replay Verdant and fetch my other green-blue land, which means I won't have 4 islands, and I won't be able to Shackles his commander. So thinking like 2 or 3 what-ifs down the road, this was a small risk. But what I realized is that if my opponent did have a disenchant effect, he wouldn't kill Crucible, he would kill Shackles. So with that in mind, I go ahead and just double block here. And then if he were to kill Shackles, his guy wouldn't die because he would get his Elvish Mystic back. My Arbor would die, but then I could just replay it off Crucible and we could carry on. So he doesn't actually have a disenchant here, which is great. I traded his creature and a creature that never dies for his creature. And I also got to untap my Shackles here. So nice top deck with Glen Elendra. I do want to get Edric down and start drawing. So before I do anything, I'm going to go ahead and tap for 4. Untap those lands immediately, those permanents immediately. Cast a Glen having done nothing. This way I can decide to put Arbor into play, or I could put Verdant into play, or what I was thinking is I might cast Edric and before I play land, and then attack and hope to draw a Strip Mine or Wasteland to take out his tomb. But he's got Arcane Denial, not a very good card, but it does kind of make sense when you're expecting to draw up to 7. I still think the card basically sucks. I do not like giving my opponent free cards, but it has place. Really, the place that Arcane Denial shines is in a deck where it's kind of like Pact of Negation. You basically want to play this in a deck where you're going to combo somebody out and just kill them right on the spot, and the extra cards you just gave them aren't going to matter a bit. But anyway, so I go ahead and just cast Edric here since I don't need to leave blue back for Glen, and I'm going to swing with these 2 cards here and find out what land I should be putting into play. And because I don't see any reason not to, I go ahead and cast the Arbor, or replay the Arbor, so that I have 1 extra attacker next turn for my opponents to have to deal with. And I also get to draw 2 cards off Arcane Denial here. Now, if my opponent had a card like, I don't know, Plagiarize, or more likely the blue-black creature who functions like a Plagiarize, says if your opponent would draw extra cards, you draw them instead. He's some kind of thief, Notion Thief. My opponent had Notion Thief here, and the mana to play it, which is the other piece. My opponent would have to actually cast an Notion Thief before we got to the point where I'm selecting how many cards to draw. So even if he had the extra mana for a Notion Thief here, I would not, once we got this to this point in the game, I wouldn't feel threatened. So I go ahead and just take the max cards. The only way that he can punish me for that, really, realistically, at this point would be something like probably dumping his hand and casting Windfall, maybe. I mean, I was trying to figure out why is he playing Arcane Denial. The only thing I could come up with was just that with Damia refilling your hand, he just assumes that the card advantage doesn't matter. But anyway, I never find out, though, if that was it or if he's trying to play combo, because he looks at the board state, he looks at his hand, he looks at how many cards are in my hand and what's about to happen next turn, and he gives up. So it was an amazing game because I think I went 2 mana on turn 1. He bumped me down to 2 mana versus 0, and then he bumped me to 1 to 0. Next turn, boom, I'm at 3 to 0. He suddenly goes to 2 to my 3. On the next turn, I go to 4 to 2, and then on his turn he jumps up to, oh no, I go to 5 to 2 because I played 4 to 5, 6 to 2 because I played Palladium Mirror. So I go 1 mana, 3 mana, bump back down to 2, jump back up to 6, knocked back down to 4, at which point he jumps from 0 to 2 to 6 himself. And then here we are a couple turns later, and I'm sitting at, what is this? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 4 is 10. And the land I could play would be 11 mana next turn, or potentially much, much more if I was to get that Priest of Titania down and start pumping her with Teferi, which is the other thing that's kind of cool about Teferi. Tricks with Shackles, tricks with things like Priest of Titania. I think Teferi is just such a good card. It probably belongs in every blue deck, but who knows? And with that in mind, let's take a look at Zur. Just the fact that Teferi costs at a maximum of 2 mana once it resolves, and often it costs something like negative mana. You play it and suddenly you generate more mana than it costs you to play it. Card's insane. So at one time, I think in my last video, I was talking about taking Fact or Fiction and making it a memory lapse. You can see that I've done that. I also took out Anguished Unmaking and Thoughtseize. It felt like the extra life loss with the Necropotence and everything, it just wasn't... It's not that it was bad, it just wasn't necessary. There's so many other good things you can be doing. Anguish Unmaking is basically Oblivion Ring in this deck, and I've got Recoil as an instant and as a blue fetchable target with Merchant Scrolls, so I'm pretty good there. So I took I took out those two cards, and then as far as Thoughtseize goes, again, I mean the life loss isn't a big deal, but the thing is, you have to get Thoughtseize early for it to be pretty decent. Once you get to the point where you've attacked with Zur, Thoughtseize is basically useless because you just don't you don't give a crap about their hand. You're just because you have so many counter spells that you're just going to prevent whatever it is that they want to do anyway. So, it's basically, do I want to tap some mana on my turn and lose 2 life for the privilege of seeing their hand, or do I just want to stop what they're going to do anyway and win? So with that in mind, I took that out. I took out the Thoughtseize and I replaced it with Negate, which will, 9/10 of the time be a Thoughtseize anyway, because it's going to do what I want, which is stop the important cards, the ones that allow my opponent to recover. And then as far as Anguish Unmaking goes, like I said, I think the fairy probably belongs in every deck, so I went ahead and put him back in. I slotted him back into the deck. Gives me a little more resiliency against somebody who finds a way to prevent me from doing something with Zur, because it gives me some really gross planeswalkers to do great things, and of course the ever so important power of Necropotence. So those are the changes to Zur. No other changes on the land side. Scroll down so you could see them. Scroll back up. So that's it. Hope you enjoyed the video. It wasn't too long, but I don't think they always have to be. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.